while we on the corner, crying aloud, looking hostile. This UPK style, can't stop now. Find this warfare, couldn't last one round. Let the oppressed rise, let the rich mourn till the sundown. Enough with this shit, about to make it hot, call it compound. This for my niggas, put the guns in the drums down. Dwelling in peace to the Lord, call for the blood. Trying to decide my death, and y'all beside yourself. For what you perform, how you gon' hide yourself? Devil got the job for his eyes, and he got no love for the drugs. Nah, just fooling bitches. And then my father's house is speeding mansions. I got plenty bitches for the Avengers. This your death sentence. I'm talking real slaughter, 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 slaughter. That they do not rise. Go in and feel the world with eyes. Ain't down for your skin. You gon' die for your pride. By talking to you. So run for your life. Try to destroy my people. You gotta pay the price, nigga. You gotta hear, let them hear. Till the devil's let me in this deal. Slaughter, slaughter. Now they shook from vicious words out this handed book. About to take these rappers back to school. My flow standing hook. They crossed the line, ain't no coming back. You became no cowards. The only thing sweet is the honey check. Righteous is the Lord. Give me rest from my sorrow. And hang down death for the devils. There's no tomorrow. Why? Cause they violence leave a man to step close. You see a man in the bench. I see horns in a pitch. So please believe it. The white man is a demon. And I ain't gonna go for them to free me. No, I mean it's still weak. It's not thing. I see it. I got this nigga on his knees. They wanna have peace. We're screaming, let this bitch burn at 1,000 degrees. And in the bosom of revenge. I told her I'd do anything she please. As I squeeze on the double D's. Fuck you, man. I'm talking real. Slaughter, 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 slaughter. That they do not rise. Go in and feel the world rise. Ain't down for your skin. You gon' die for your pride. That's by talking to you. So run for your life. Try to destroy my people. You gotta pay the price, nigga. You gotta hear, let them hear. Till the devil's let me in. Slaughter, slaughter.
The police just shot him for no apparent reason. No reason at all. They asked for license and registration. That's the police officer over there that did it. With the black on. I can't really do shit because they got me handcuffed. I can't believe they just did this. I'm fucking back!
Try to destroy my people. You gotta pay the price, nigga. You gotta hear, let them hear. Till the devil's let me in this deal. Slaughter, slaughter.
I was gonna rip his heart out. I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion that's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lex is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody vicious. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. Yo, we're feeling your body thinking this ain't the band. You really imitation. I got to
Already told you I got the juice like a Renthal. Already know what I'm about to do, bet your men fall. Everyone know that we got the truth, all your men false. So boss, overtaking our enemies. Move calculated and orchestrated like symphonies. Smooth operated when bringing haters to misery. Top 5 list ain't shit unless you mention me. Yeah. That's why we don't associate. Fuck niggas make them more fuck niggas. Why they procreate? Why they overhate when their time is short and a moment late? Let it culminate to they harder race and impotent. Cowards perpetrate like their little group is respectable. Talking intellectual, all of you homosexuals, faggots.
There's no one like me. I'm from the airport. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want even children.
I don't want to congregate. I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to fellowship. I ain't trying to build with you. Ain't the UPK? Ain't the truth? Keep it real with you. Defenders of the faith. I got no problem bumping heads with you. All that bullshit, you can take it over there with you. Rather be a houseboy. Hang around with them field niggas. Show them to put in work. Move mountain, crush hills, nigga. Take a dead soul. Breathe life and make it live, nigga. No affiliation, so there's no one to compare with us. Took the Lord's laws and just added it with fear, nigga. Aim for the body, cause you know like killer head cripple. With these bars, I'm on my grizzly, so bear witness. You spit cold, I spit flu. Don't compare sickness. You floss diamond, I floss French. Don't compare dentist. You 3K, we meant the bullshit. We ain't Christian. Harm one of us. Get pistol whip like the gun got a belt with it. I'm bred different. The competition just a mill. I'm fed different. I stood front line with them fields. I bled different. I'd rather be a corpse than a cow with a lead different. Shit, I'm led different. Come through like a juggernaut, so don't get in the way. And we take everything serious. We don't play. I wonder now what they gonna say. Shit, we make profits out of shooters like the NBA. You get slayed for switching sides, nigga. We ain't on the same page. Immaculate conception. These niggas bitch made. I'm sticking with the foundation where my bricks lay. You switch sides, I'd rather switch K's. You was never with us, nigga. Just know we on mission, nigga. Right hand hold the scriptures, nigga. Left hand hold the pistol, nigga. How you want it? You can get it spiritual or physics, nigga. Wrong ones to come against, so bring an army with you. No affiliation. When you see us, make the difference with us. No affiliation. When you see us, know we different, nigga. No affiliation. So no, you can't kick it with us. The wrong ones to come against, bring an army with you. All right. Shalom Israel, Yahweh Shem Yahshai Thumb to all the brothers, Yahweh Shemar Thumb Shem Yahshai to all the sisters. I'm priest and officer Zarwai. All right. This is the Wednesday scripture breakdown class for Trenton, New Jersey. All right. Then we going into the promise. Understand who in the promise, who was the promise given to? You understand who holds the promise? Of course, we know that the Lord was always dealing with, the nation of Israel. So we're going to go ahead and go into that. Once again, with the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commanding General Yohana. All right, we've been bringing out this truth since 1969, that the Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indian man, woman, and child are the true Hebrew Israelites and the true heirs, to that promise, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right. The Christian church wants to have you believe that now all of a sudden that the new covenant is trying to bring in everybody. All right. So first off, I'm gonna go ahead and go into that real quick. Let's go to Jeremiah 31 and 31. All right. They want to try and say, the Christian church wants to try and say that this is a new covenant, and in this new covenant, now all nations can be saved, which is a lie. Understand? No, it's talking about all nations. When the scripture talks about all nations, it's talking about all nations because the Israelites are in all nations. You understand? It's not talking about all the other races of people on the planet. It's only talking about Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indian people who are the true Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. All right. So let's see what Jeremiah 31 and 31 says. All right. Because they want to say, because it's a new covenant,
You understand that now all people in the earth, you understand, are able to come into this into this promise, into this covenant. But we're gonna show that that's not the case. All right. So Jeremiah 31:31, it says, "Behold, the day is come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." One thing you got to understand about the Lord is that He's not the author of confusion. You understand? He's not going to say something in the scripture to where it leaves you confused. He said exactly who He's talking about, that He's going to make this new covenant with. He made it very clear on who He is talking about. He said with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. All right. This is one thing we got to understand. When you start to go into the scripture and you start to see that heathens and Gentiles, you got to go into context of who it's talking about, because you got to understand that the nation of Israel was cut off from the Lord, from being His people. All right. That's when it comes into the adoption. That's what we're going to also go into as well, is that who the adoption is for. That adoption, being adopted back by the Most High, is talking about the nation of Israel. It's not talking about any other nation. All right. When people want to bring up, to the Jew and to the Gentile, they want to make it seem like Gentile is a nation of people when it's not. You understand? It's just a what's the word? Like a term for all people who are outside of the nation of Israel. All right. It's not a specific race of people. Like if you ask any Christian who is a race of Gentile, like they can't say, because it pertains to all people who are outside of the nation of Israel, and as well it pertains to Israelites. All right. That's one thing you could. We're gonna also go into that as well. We're gonna look at that real quick. The definition of Gentile. All right. Like the heathens, like we didn't write the definition on Wikipedia. You understand? The ISUPK did not write the definition of Gentile in Wikipedia. All right. And in Wikipedia, it tells you that the Gentiles also pertain to Israelites. Okay, to Israelites. Now, if they know that, like if the these heathens who have wrote the Wikipedia definitions, they know that Gentiles pertains to Israelites as well. Then we are the only ones who don't know that. All right. So let's keep reading, right? Let's read it from the top again. Jeremiah 31:31. All right. It says, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." All right. It says, "Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers." It's talking about their fathers. All right. The nation of Israel. Right? Not the forefathers of Esau or Moab or Ammon, you understand, Amalek. It said their fathers, all right? The nation of Israel. Reading on, it says, "Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt." Now we know who came out of the land of Egypt. It was only the Israelites. All right. It says, "Although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord." That's why, the Lord always refers to us as going off, whoring with other gods. You understand? Verse 33, it says, "But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel." So now he's talking about this new covenant, right? This new covenant. Let's see if he adds everybody on the planet. Let's see if he adds all the other nations on the planet. You could understand that in Psalms 83, these nations were his enemies and still are his enemies, right? So all of a sudden now he's gonna let these enemies be his people. That's not happening with the Lord. All right. So he says very clearly, like I said, he is not the author of confusion, like the scripture says. You understand? He is not the author of confusion. It says, "But this shall be the covenant that I make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord." All right. One sec. Let me make sure the sound is to It's looking like it might not be. That I make with. Okay, so I was 12. All right. So, lucky for that, I just had to make sure the sound was 12. All right. Verse 33 from the top. It says, "But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts," which is your mind. You understand? Like you will have it in your mind because now you will have the spirit of the law. Because Christ, that's what Christ came for, to give us the spirit of the law. You understand? To walk in the spirit of Christ is to be obedient. You understand? To be obedient and have the spirit of the law. Right? You won't eat pork because now you know that it's wrong to the Lord. You understand? Now you know, like you won't do it because it's something that you shouldn't do, and the Lord wants you to obey. You understand? He doesn't want all these sacrifices, like he says. You understand? Like all these things belong to him anyways. Why would he want any animal sacrifices? It's always been that you were the sacrifice. You understand? That you would be obedient. That's all he ever cared for. All right. So reading on. It says, "I will put my law in their inward parts and write in their hearts, and will be their God." So he said he will be their God, the house of Israel, not everybody's God. You understand? Here's the thing: they will every knee shall bend, like the scripture says, but he is not their God, not their power, right? Like that's the actual the actual word, right? Is power, not God. He is not their power. He is the power of Israel. You understand? But they will all serve. All nations will serve the Lord. You understand? When Christ returns. All right. It says, "And they shall be my people." Right? They shall be my people. Why? Because we was cut off from being his people. You understand? So we see very clearly, very, very clearly. Right. So if we let's just ask ourselves, if we was cut off from being his people, what are we now? What are we? You understand? Once we was cut off from being his people, we were now Gentiles. We were now heathens, right? And anybody in the nation of Israel, you understand? This is what we have to understand when it comes to terms like Gentile or heathen, right? These are just bywords. You understand? We got to understand that anybody who was kicked out of the nation of Israel, you understand? Like if you missed the Passover, if for any reason, right? If for any reason you was kicked out of the nation of Israel, you was no longer looked at as an Israelite. You was now looked at as a heathen. You understand? So we got to start to understand this, right? And when we read through the scriptures, is that when you come to a term like Gentile or heathen, you understand, or even Greek, you gotta take into context what the actual context is when it pertains to that word. All right, so we're gonna get some of that. All right, so we're gonna come back a little bit later to Jeremiah 31. All right, let's go to Genesis 21. All right, Genesis, the 21st chapter and the 12th verse. Genesis 21 and verse 12. All right. Actually, it's like for another second. Let me actually share the class. I forgot to share the class that I make with that. Hold on. Genesis. All right. Now, Genesis 21 and 12, right? It says, "And the Most High said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad." Talking about Ishmael, you understand? Talking about Ishmael because, of course, Ishmael was his son, you understand? And any man, of course, is going to have love for his son, right? But Sarah didn't want, didn't want Ishmael to, have any partake in the birthright of Isaac. You understand? So she was telling them to, send them out, right? And Abraham was feeling, he was feeling sad about it. You understand? Because of his son, right? So God tells him this, and the Most High said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, talking about Ishmael, and because of the bondwoman, Ishmael's mother. It says, in all that Sarah have said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. So the Most High is like, yeah, get rid of that, that son, send him out, right? He's like, listen to the woman, right? Listen to what she got to say. All right, it says, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called, because that was the Lord. That was what the Lord wanted, is that in Isaac. That's why he told Sarah that she would conceive. You understand? Because he wanted that seed to be from right there, from Abraham and Sarah, that he would put the promise on, right? That's why he says, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. It says, and also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba, right? So you see, like he said, and this is the difference, right? Is that Ishmael got a blessing, right? Ishmael received the blessing. He said he will make him, a great nation, right? And this is the difference, though, is that Isaac got the promise, right? The promise of, the kingdom of heaven, right? The promise of the Lord, right? And we're going to see that there's a difference between a promise and a blessing, right? So let's drop that one. Let's go to Genesis 26. And verse 3. Genesis chapter 26 and verse 3. All right. The book of Genesis, chapter 26 and verse 3, it says, sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed, now we saw who the seed that the Lord was talking about. He said, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So here's the where the promise takes place, right? The Lord chose Isaac, right? Where he said, in unto thy seed. Okay, it wasn't talking about Ishmael, and of course Abraham had other sons, right? I believe altogether he had 8, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so it says, for unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. All right, and it says, verse 4, and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. All right. So we see, actually, Salaki, this was talking about Isaac, right? So we see how it's going to his seed now, right? And Isaac, we're gonna see how the promise went unto Jacob, right? So this is where the promise takes place. Goes from Abraham, of course, to Isaac, and then to Jacob, where the Lord told Abraham, right, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Now he's telling Isaac, you understand, that he will pass the promise unto the oath which he swore unto Abraham thy father, and will make thy seed be as and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven. All right, so he's talking about Jacob. All right, so we see how it's going, how the promise is passing down. All right, so let's drop that. Wait, yeah, let's drop that. All right. Let me see. We're going to Genesis, uh, the 12th chapter, and I'm going to start at the first verse. All right. Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1. All right. So Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1, it says, Now the Most High have said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and far from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation. All right. So this where Abraham, his faith came into play, right? He did what the Lord said, right? And that's what we got to understand. Our faith is our works, right? Abraham believed God. Abraham believed what God was saying, right? And he went out and did it. He showed his faith by his works, right? So he says, verse 2, And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee. So here's the criteria, right? Here's the standard of where a nation can be blessed. Okay. Now remember, a blessing is not the promise. So these other races of people, these other nations of people, they can catch a blessing, right? Like for instance, America is set up to where the Edomites have the promise, right? That promise of what's the American dream or whatever? The promise, the pursuit of happiness, right? Like promise of the pursuit of happiness is their promise, and it's not pertaining to us, right? But we can catch a blessing. Like we'll have one black or Hispanic or Native American Indian where they might become a millionaire. You understand? Or you'll get a stimulus check here and there. You understand? Or you might get one, black or Hispanic or Native American where they get into, office or whatever, as a senator or governor or whatever, right? But that's just a crumb. That's just a little blessing. That's not the promise, right? Like where our promise is, right? Our promise is the kingdom of heaven, right? Salvation. These things, right? That we will inherit the earth. That we will be above all nations on planet earth, right? These are the promises that we will inherit. A little blessing, you understand, is not the promise. Like Ishmael, he was blessed, with a great nation. Esau, he was blessed with a sword. You understand? Like these other nations can catch a blessing, but a blessing and a promise is two different things. All right. So here's the criteria. Right. Here's the thing where how they can catch a blessing. Right. And it's very clear. Verse 3, it says, And I will bless them that bless thee. So here's the first thing, is that if any other nation, any other race of people want to be blessed by the Most High God, they first have to bless the nation of Israel. Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indian people, right? They need to this is something that every nation out there needs to realize, is that they need to realize who they have in their possession, right? And start to realize if they want to catch any type of blessing, you understand, they need to get down on their face and kiss the boots of Black, Hispanic, and Native American people. All right. They need to give up all their wealth. Put all your wealth and all your credit cards. Just send them over to the ISUPK. We'll take care of it. All right. And all this land that you have, just give it back. Right. But I mean, of course, they're not going to do that. You understand? That's why Christ is going to come and destroy this place. Okay. So once again, verse 3, it says, And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curses thee. And that's what's taking place in America, is that they're trying to curse us, which punish us, right? They're trying to, do whatever they can, put knees on our neck, shoot us dead in our homes, whatever they can do to just keep us destroyed, to keep us in poverty, right? Redlining, Jim Crow, right? Putting us in concentration camps, or what they call reservations, or putting us in cages on the border, right? Whipping our Haitian brothers on the border, whatever they can do, right? To keep us in poverty and impoverished, right? So of course they're gonna catch that punishment from the Lord. You understand? They're gonna catch that punishment from the Lord. All right. So here's the criteria of how one of another nation can catch a blessing. First, they have to start to bless us. You understand? So it says, "And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curse thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Right? Because the scripture says, when the righteous beareth rule, the people will rejoice. They will have to be our servants, right? But they will rejoice, man, because the earth will be in the hands of the righteous. You understand? The earth will be in the hands of the righteous. All right. There won't be no more COVID-19 because people want to eat bats and rats or whatever. You understand? There won't be no more, mass shootings in schools. You can send your kid to the school and feel safe that they'll come home to you, right? Like there won't be no more child. You know what's crazy is that you can't even send your kid out, right? And feel safe that they can play in the park and that they can go to school, because either they're gonna get snatched up, right, by a child molester, or they're gonna actually make it to school where Edomites can go in there and shoot up the school. You understand? Like, that's why the scripture says, man, when the righteous bear fruit, the people will rejoice. Yes, they will be our servants, but they're gonna live in a world where they don't have to worry about their kids getting snatched up at at the park or whatever. They don't have to worry about their kids, catching COVID-19, right? So let's drop that. All right. Let's go to Genesis chapter 25. So we see, right? We see where the promise and a blessing is two different things, right? The promise went unto Abraham and unto Isaac, where the Lord said, "In Isaac shall that seed be called." But Ishmael caught a blessing. You understand? He caught a blessing to be a great nation, right? And then we saw where the Lord said that he would pass the promise unto Isaac's seed. Of course, that's Jacob. All right. Let's go to Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. And let's start at verse 23. All right. So Genesis chapter 25 and verse 23. All right. It says, "And the Lord said unto her, two nations are in thy womb." So, of course, because she was barren, right? Like, the Lord said that she would conceive. All right. And she's, going to the Lord saying, like, why am I done? Let's actually read it, right? Let's start at verse 21, actually. Let's start at verse 21. All right, let's read. Let's get a little backstory, right? It says, "And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived." All right, so she was barren. Isaac went. How do you entreat of the Lord? You go to a prophet of God. All right. So Rebekah his wife conceived. Verse 22, it says, "And the children struggled together within her." So they was fighting already in the womb. You understand? Like this story that plays out, man, is that these two nations, which we're going to see, have always been enemies. All right. In the womb, they was fighting. All right. It says, "And the children struggled together within her. And she said, If it be so, why am I thus?" Like, if this is the Lord's will, why are they struggling in my womb? Right? It says, "And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, Two nations are in thy womb." So anybody that's saying, like, well, they was brothers, they was this, they was that. Yeah, but the Lord, here's the problem is that, like Christ said, you do error not knowing the scriptures, and you do error not knowing the power of the Most High. You don't think he can put two nations inside one womb, then you don't believe he's the Most High God. You don't believe he's all powerful, that he's the Most High power. You understand? The Lord can do anything that he wants. All right. And here we see he put two nations inside one womb. All right. It says, two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people. You see how, like, Black, Hispanic, and Native American, people are completely different, like have a completely different spirit than the Edomite people. You understand? Because we are two separate manner of people, man. Like, we have that, that style, that swag. You understand? They don't have that. You understand? Like, it's two separate manner of people, man, that came from one womb. Like I said, man, you do err not knowing the power of the Most High. He can do that, right? And it says, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people. All right, so one people, and you can see how strong we are, man. We go through hell, and still somehow, like they try everything to wipe us off the face of the earth. Really, they abortion clinics, drugs, and whoredom in our neighborhoods, and just to plain out flat murdering us, right? Putting us in cages, doing whatever they can, right? Just look at our First Nation brothers, man. They tried to wipe them off the face of the earth, but yet still they survive, man. And then they're stuck in them concentration camps, and still they survive because they are stronger, man. They are stronger people, right? You put a Edomite in any of our situation, man, they're gonna, they're probably gonna try and take themselves out. You understand? Because they can't go through what we go through, right? So let's read on. It says, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. So the elder shall serve the younger, man. And Esau came out first. All right. So let's actually read that. It says, and when her days was and when her day to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. So Esau came out first, right? So immediately Rebecca knew. You understand? Rebecca knew that this thing, this red hairy thing that came out of her first, this was not the one who was to inherit the promise. This was not the one who was to inherit that blessing from Isaac. She knew it, right? So reading on, it says, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. So she knew where the Lord said, you understand, that the elder shall serve the younger. Because in old customs, man, the elder would have the birthright, of course, right? You see where kings would pass their kingdom down to the firstborn. But the Lord said, look, this is not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that the elder is going to serve the younger. So she knew that birthright, she knew that the promise of the Lord was supposed to go to Jacob. All right. So where was I? Verse 26. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. All right. So she knew, you understand? She knew that Isaac was that Jacob was the one. All right. So let's jump down, right? Let's jump down to verse 29, right? In the same chapter 25. All right. So not only did Rebecca know that Jacob was supposed to get that birthright, man. She knew that, right? But not only did that happen, but this also happened. Let's see. Verse 29, it says, and Jacob sought pottage, and Esau came from the field and was faint. So Esau came from outside, because he's, a cave dweller. You understand? He likes to be outside, wrestling with dogs and all that. You understand? So he comes in, right? He's feeling faint. You understand? Like weak. You understand? Verse 30 says, and Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage. It was bloody still. You understand? It wasn't even cooked yet. That he and that's the spirit of the Edomites, man, is that, they see, red blood, they want to eat it. You understand? Like I was watching, I think it was on Instagram or TikTok or something. These cats are just taking out, raw hamburger meat and just eating it like that and biting into steak like, they're, of their father, right? So he sees this red, he can't even wait till it's fully cooked, right? He can't even wait till it's just, just a little while till it's fully cooked. He's like, nah, give me the red pottage. Give it to me now. It's bloody. I want it like that. You understand? Verse 30, it says, and Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. So he's like, even though Rebecca knew that Jacob was meant to get the birthright, at this time he says, sell me your birthright to Esau. Verse 32, it says, and Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? Right? Like, here's the thing, right? He didn't care about that birthright. It meant nothing to him. Like, he's willing to give it up over what? A meal, a raw piece of meat. You understand? And he despised his birthright. Okay, for one, and for two, like, what he says, what should it profit me? Not seeing that if he had faith in the Lord, like, he would know that if the birthright was meant to go to him, you understand, he would get it. You understand, and his seed, right? But he didn't care about that. He was like, what does it mean to me, right? If I die, what good is it to me, right? Well, here's the thing, just die. You understand? Just die. You're gonna give up your birthright over a piece of meat? Just die then, right? But of course, he's Esau. He's not. He didn't care. He just wanted to. And was he really at the point of death? I mean, who knows, right? But it says he was faint. I mean, are you really gonna die if you're just faint? I mean, but of course, he sold his birthright, right? Let's read on. It says, verse 33, and Jacob said, swear to me this day, and he swore unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. So again, Esau sold his birthright. Of course, like I said over and over again, that Rebecca knew it was meant for him in the first place. And the second place, Esau sold it to him. All right. So verse 34, it says, then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright, man. He despised it. You understand? He didn't care about it. All right. So let's jump to chapter 27. All right. Let's go to 27 and verse 13. So, well, actually, I'm just going to give you a little bit of the backstory, right? So Rebecca tells Jacob, you understand, that to go, right, to put, some fur on him, you know, and to make some meat for his father, right, Isaac. All right. So now I'm gonna start at verse 10, chapter 27, verse 10. It says, "And thou shalt bring it to thy father that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death." And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man." Right? Because we know Edomites, they come out hairy, right? Verse 12, "My father peradventure will fill me, and I shall seem to him a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing." Verse 13, "And his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son. Only obey my voice and go fetch me." So why she say that? Right? She said that because she knew it wasn't gonna be a curse. You understand? Because that was the Lord's will. The Lord's will. The Lord told him, told her, you understand, that the elder shall serve the younger. She knew that birthright was meant for Jacob. So when Isaac was getting ready to pass, she was like, "Look, you're gonna go in there." You understand? Isaac couldn't see, right? He was going blind, and she told Jacob, "Go in there, man, and fix him up some of that pottage like Esau does. Put on some hairy garment or whatever, and go in there and get that blessing," because she knew it was meant for him. All right. So we see how the blessing went from Abraham to Isaac and to Jacob. All right, the promise. Okay, so that's let's go to the book of Romans. All right, chapter 9. The book of Romans, chapter 9. And I'm gonna start at verse 3. All right. The book of Romans, chapter 9, and I'm gonna start at verse 3. We're gonna see one thing right here. We're gonna see a few things actually, but you need to pay close attention. You understand? So Romans chapter 9 and verse 3, it says, "Concerning his son, Yahweh Shai Mashiach, our Lord, which was made of the seed of..." Oh, slack. I'm in the wrong thing chapter. Verse 3. Romans chapter 9, verse 3, it says, "For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh." So Paul is saying that he could wish himself was separated from Christ for his brothers, man, according to the flesh. And Paul, you can read that in Romans 11. You understand that he said that he was an Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin. Paul was not a Gentile. Well, in the sense of being a Roman, an actual Roman, you understand, or an actual heathen. Paul was a Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin, man, according to the flesh. So he's talking about his flesh and blood brothers, man. All right. So it says, verse 4, "Who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption." So everything, if you get the definition, right? To pertain to something means to belong to. You understand? So the list of what we're going to read, he's going to go over a list, right? So everything this list, it all pertains to or belongs to his brethren, his kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites, man. Who are Israelites. So this whole list, it only pertains to the Israelites, man. Paul is never saying that any of this pertains to any other nation of people. All right. So we got to understand, because here we're reading off, right? From the jump, it's going into how he is feeling for his brothers who are Israelites. All right. Remember, this is the context, is that he's talking about Israelites. All right. It says, "Who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants." All right. So the adoption pertains to the Israelites. Nobody else can be adopted in, because it only pertains to the Israelites. All right. It says, and the glory and the covenants, both covenants with an S. You understand? Both the covenants, the old covenant, the new covenant, they only pertain to the Israelites. All right. It says, and the giving of the law. Of course, the giving of the law was only ever given to the Israelites. You understand? To be obedient is to keep the law. And only Israelites can be obedient to the Lord. To have faith is your works in keeping the law. So to have faith is only pertaining to the Israelites, because only the Israelites were given the law. All right. It says, and the service of God and the promises. The promises was only ever given to the Israelites. And we saw how. We saw how because it went from Abraham to Isaac and to Jacob. And remember, the criteria for anybody, any other nation to catch any kind of blessing, right, is that first they must bless the nation of Israel. You understand? You gotta understand, all you other nations out there outside of the actual true nation of Israel, that y'all gotta start blessing. You understand? You better start, sending all your money, sending the deeds to your homes, sending the pink slips to your cars, man, because that's what it's gonna take for y'all to survive. All right. So let's read on. It says, and the promises, that promise of salvation, man, that promise of salvation, it only pertains to the Israelites. What do the other nations need to be, have salvation from? You understand? Like, they believe that, they need salvation, but from what? They run the planet Earth. You understand? They have us as their slaves. They do pretty much anything that they want to us. What do they need to be saved from? Right? So the promise of salvation, the promise of the kingdom of heaven, like Christ said, Christ told his disciples, don't go into the way of the Gentiles. You understand? And enter any of the city of the Samaritans, enter ye not, but go rather, meaning go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, man. Right? And he said, when you go to them, preach to them that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So Christ, out of his own mouth, he said that the kingdom of heaven isn't for everybody. He said, when you go to the to the Israel, go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as ye go, preach to them that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So Christ, out of his own mouth, said that the kingdom of heaven isn't for everybody. He even said, you understand, that I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. All right. So out of his own mouth, he's saying something far from what your Christian pastor is saying. Your Christian pastor is saying that the kingdom of heaven, the promises, and Christ, they're all came for everybody on the planet. When Christ, out of his own mouth, said, don't go to the Gentiles, right? But go rather only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel and preach to them that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, because the kingdom of heaven is for them, right? And then he's saying, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So, like, who are we to believe? Your Christian pastor or Christ, right? The scripture says, let God be true and every man a liar, man. And Christ and his Father on one accord. You understand? So who are we to believe? Like, I say we should believe, what Christ said, right? He said he ain't sent for everybody, man. He sent for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. All right. So reading on, it says, verse 5, whose are the fathers? We are the fathers, right? Like he said, Deuteronomy 7:6. A holy, chosen people. He chose us. A nation of people to be above all the other people. We are the fathers. Like he said, I'm paraphrasing, that in the division of the nations, he set them rulers, but Israel is his portion. We are the Most High God's portion, man. We are his people. All right. So it says, whose are the fathers, and of whom as concerning. So remember, very clearly, he said all these things pertain to the nation of Israel. And he said, whose are the fathers? You understand? Meaning Israel is the father's people, right? So it says, and of whom as concerning what? Concerning whose are the fathers? The nation of Israel. And of whom as concerning the flesh and blood, what? Flesh and blood Israelites. Concerning the flesh. It says, concerning the flesh, Christ came. Christ came to save flesh and blood Israelites. You can't be adopted into being an Israelite. You can't convert into being an Israelite. An Israelite is an Israelite by blood. Do you understand? An Israelite is an Israelite by blood, just like a Chinese man is a Chinese man by blood. You understand? A Japanese man, like I can't go over there to Japan and say, well, I'm a Japanese now. I'm no longer a Mexican. I'm no longer a wetback. Don't look at me as a wetback. I'm now a Japanese. They're gonna say, what? You're a wetback. You know, go back to where you came from. Nobody can convert into being a different bloodline. You understand? And Christ came for a specific flesh, a specific bloodline, which is the nation of Israel. And if you don't believe me, like the scripture says, you know, let God be true and every man a liar. Let's just read it one more time. It says, verse 5, whose are the fathers, and of whom as concerning the flesh Christ came. Christ came for the flesh. Christ came to save, like it says in Matthew 1:21, that he will come and save his people. His people are the Jews, man, the Israelites. Christ was an Israelite. All right. It says, who is over all? Of course, he is king over the whole earth. He is king over the whole earth, but he is the Most High God, right? Is not the power of everybody, and he didn't send Christ to come and die for everybody. He sent Christ to come and die and to save the nation of Israel, the people of the promise. You understand? The people who pertain to those promises, like we just read in verse 4, who are Israelites. All right, let's read on. It says, God bless forever. Amen. Verse 6, it says, not as though the word of the Most High have taken none effect, for they are not all Israel, which are of Israel. So to be of something, right, means you act like, you are like, right? Like Christ said, you know, be in the world, not of it, right? Like if you're of the world, right, that means that you are doing what the world does, right? You are celebrating Christmas, eating pork, sleeping with whores, doing drugs, doing all these things. You are now of the world, right? So they are not all of Israel that are, let me read it correctly. It says, for they are not all Israel, which are of Israel, right? Because a lot of people want to say that they are, we know who we're talking about, right? The so-called Jewish people, right? The people who Whoopi Goldberg, you know, had that issue with, right? They are not Israel, right? But they are of Israel. How? Because they want to take our scripture. They want to say that they are Israel. They want to put their name like they are Israel. They want to, you know, try and keep the commandments and all that, but they're not Israel, right? That's why I said Christ came for the flesh, because they are not all Israel, which are of Israel. Christ came for the flesh and blood, true Israelites. You understand? Verse 7, it says, neither because they are the seed of Abraham. Why? Because Ishmael was the seed of Abraham. And all the other sons he had was the seed of Abraham, right? It says, neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children. Why? Because the Lord said, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. The promise was meant for Isaac, not for any other seed, man. And Paul is clear as day stating that. Like the whole beginning of the chapter has been all pertaining to Israel and how Israel is the only one that will receive the covenants, receive the promises, receive the adoption. The only ones who Christ will come for the flesh and blood Israelites, right? And he's saying not because they're all not all that are of Israel are Israel, and not neither because they are the seed of Abraham, right? Are they all children? But in Isaac shall thy seed be called. He ain't coming for any other seed of Abraham. Christ. He is not coming for any other seed of. He's not coming for Ishmael. He's not coming for the 6 other, sons that Abraham had. Christ is only coming for the seed of Isaac, which is now Jacob and the 12 tribes. All right. Let's read on. Verse 8, it says, that is, they which are of the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God. So it's talking about those other seeds, Ishmael and the other sons. Just because they're the children of Abraham's flesh doesn't mean that they're the children of God. All right. And that's clear as day. Clear as day. Paul is clearly telling you, not everybody on the planet Earth is the sons of God. Not everybody on the planet Earth is this pertaining to, right? It's only pertaining to the Israelites. All right. So reading on. It says, but the children of the promise. Now there's the difference, right? The children of the promise, man. These other nations can have a blessing, yeah. That is the same as a blessing that, like, you would say, oh, I'm blessed because I got a new car, or I'm blessed because, I got a stimulus check. That's the same way that they'll be blessed in little crumbs. And we're going to get an example of this, all right, in a minute. So it says, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. The children of the promise, man, are counted for the seed, which we saw Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Of course, it went to his 12 children, right? Verse 9, it says, for this is the word of the promise. At this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only this, but when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even by our father Isaac, for the children being not yet born. So we saw that, right? When Rebekah had the twins, you understand? So Paul here is showing the same example, right? It says, for the children not being yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the promise of God according to election might stand. Here's the thing for all you nuts out there that want to say that Jacob went and stole Esau's birthright and the promise and all this. Like, let's read this very clearly one more time, okay? Verse 11, it says, for the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil. So remember, they're not born yet when this is taking place. All right. So it's nothing Jacob did. All right. It says that having done any good or evil, Jacob didn't do no good or no evil, right? That the purpose of God according to election might stand. Here's for all you nuts out there that are saying Jacob went and stole that birthright, that Jacob went and that he was, being sneaky and conniving and all this, blah, blah, blah. It was the Lord's election. He chose Jacob, and there's nothing you could do about it. You understand? And Rebekah knew this. Rebekah knew that Jacob was the one to receive this promise, to receive this birthright, not Esau. And it was according to the election of the Most High God, not anybody else. All right. It says that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. There was nothing they did, but it was God's choice to choose Jacob, man. For all you crazy, nuts out there saying that Jacob went and stole this, no, it was always meant for Jacob. All right. So let's jump down for time's sake. So we see like the whole thing, the whole chapter is talking about the Israelites, right? It's talking about how the Israelites pertain, the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the law, the promises, and that Christ would come to save those flesh and blood Israelites who are the fathers. You understand? Not according because not all that are of Israel are Israel, right? Them so-called, Jews over there want to say that they are Israel, but they are not. You understand? And not because not of the seed are they all children of the Most High God. You understand? So here we see this context is all talking about how nobody else except flesh and blood Israelites are the children of God. The whole context has been that. All right. So let's jump down to verse let's jump down to verse 24. All right. Let's jump down to verse 24. It says, even us. So this whole context, right? I jumped down for time's sake, right? But you can read the whole chapter and see how the whole context is talking about how the flesh and blood Israelites are only the people of God. All right. So here, when we get to verse 24, somehow Christians get, confused here because they want to save everybody on the planet. And really when they say that, they're only talking about Edomites. All right. So here, verse 24, it says, even us. So who's the us? Who is the us that Paul is talking about? He's been only talking about the nation of Israel, the flesh and blood Israelites. So when he says even us, he's including himself, right? Even us, whom he have called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. Why? Because Paul was living as a Gentile. Right before he came into the truth, Paul was living as a Gentile. You understand? Paul was a Roman citizen. You understand? Calling himself a Roman. But he knew, as far as flesh and blood, he was an Israelite. He was just living as a heathen, right? He was living as a Gentile. That's why he's saying, even us whom he have called. Who was the called? The Israelites, right? That, like he said in what was it, verse 4, right? So he's saying, even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, not only the ones who are living in Judea and living like still as the Jews, right? But the ones who went off, you understand? The ones who left, and don't get it twisted, all Israel was kicked out from being the Lord's people, but more specifically, the northern tribes was cast off. You understand? So let's keep reading. Even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles, because we was living as Gentiles. If you are here in America and you're calling yourself American, you're calling yourself African American, you're calling yourself Mexican American, right? You're calling yourself a heathen. You're calling yourself as a Gentile, right? So we are flesh and blood Israelites, though. You understand? Living as heathens here in America. We are flesh and blood Israelites, though. Christ came to save us from living like this. You understand? Let's read on. It says, as he said also in OC, OC is Hosea. You understand? So Paul here is quoting Hosea. We got to see what Hosea is saying, right? To be clear on what Paul is saying. So remember, the whole context of the 9th chapter is talking about Israelites being flesh and blood Israelites who Christ came to die for, who pertain to the promises. All right. So let's get Hosea. Let's hold this where we're at. Let's go to Hosea, right? Because remember, when Paul, when Christ, when Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, when they was teaching, right? When they was out there teaching, there was no New Testament. You understand? There was no New Testament. Paul wasn't reading from the New Testament. You understand? Paul was reading from the Old Testament. That's why he said everything written aforetime. What's aforetime? Aforetime is the Old Testament. He said everything written aforetime was written for our learnings. That's why he's quoting Hosea. You understand? Paul didn't come to change nothing. Neither did Christ. Paul is quoting Hosea. All right. And he says that everything written aforetime was written for our learning. But the Christian church wants you to do away with the Old Testament, right? They don't want you to even be in there and reading it. So let's get this real quick. All right. It says, verse 9, it says, then saith the Most High, call his name, chapter 1, Hosea chapter 1 and verse 9. It says, then said the Most High, call his name Lo Amai, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. So if God cut us off, and he said, you're no longer my people, then what have we become now? We have become Gentiles. We have become heathens, calling ourselves Greek, just like we call ourselves American today. You understand? It says, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. I will not be your power. Verse 10, yet the number of the children of Israel, all right, the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. Why? Because we will be adopted back. The adoption, the glory, the giving of the covenants, the law, the promises, it all pertains to Israel. We will be adopted back and we will be called the children of God again. Not anybody else. He said the house of Israel. Let's read it one more time. Verse 10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, who? Israel, right? We just read it. There it shall be said unto them, who? Israel, we just read it, right? Ye are the sons of the living God. Said unto them, the children of Israel. Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel, right, the northern and the southern kingdom, right, be gathered together and appoint themselves one head, Christ, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. So we see Paul is quoting this. Paul is quoting this. So Paul is knowing that it's pertaining to Israel. It's pertaining to the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. All right. So when we go back to Romans 9, remember, Romans 9, man, it's the killer. You understand? For all people who think all people can be saved and all people are part of the covenant. Like this whole chapter has been pertaining to the Israelites and how they would that Christ would come for their flesh and blood Israelites. All right. So when we go to verse 24, we see when it says even us, Paul is including himself. Why? Because he lived as a Gentile, but he was an Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin. You understand? It says even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. As he said also in OC, I will call them my people, which were not my people. So he's quoting like verbatim, man, like exactly what Hosea is saying. And Hosea was saying pertaining to the Israelites. It says, as he said also in Hosea, I will call them my people, which were not my people. Who was the people who was not God's people? Israelites. They was cut off, like he said in verse 9 in Hosea chapter 1. And her beloved, which was not beloved. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there shall they be called the children of the living God. Like he said exactly what Hosea said, but it was pertaining to the Israelites. All right. And then he goes on in verse 27, he says, Isaiah, which is Isaiah, also crieth concerning who? Concerning Israel. So if Isaiah is crying out concerning Israel, Hosea is crying out concerning Israel, then who in the hell is Paul crying out for concerning Israel? I mean, who is he crying out for? You know, like he said in the beginning of the chapter, for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites. You understand? Paul ain't never said nothing about going to any other nation of people, man. These Gentiles who he's going to are Israelites, man. They are Israelites who are living as Gentiles. It says, Isaiah also cried out concerning Israel. Though the number of the children of Israel be as the sands of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. Who shall be saved, though? Israel. It says, for he will finish the work and cut it short in righteousness, because a short work will the Lord make upon the earth. And as Isaiah said before, except the Lord of a Sabbath have left us a seed. A seed is a man's sperm. You understand? It says, we had been as Sodom and been like unto Gomorrah. The Lord left that seed. You understand? Because why? Because he always will love Israel. He will always choose Israel. Israel will always be his people. You understand? And if he hadn't, we would have been like under Sodom and Gomorrah. Like there is no Sodom and Gomorrah no more. You understand? And like I said, the Lord will always choose Israel. So let's go back to, like I said, we're going to go back to Jeremiah 31 and verse, I believe 35. All right. So Jeremiah 31 and 35. I was actually going to go into a little bit more in Galatians, but it's looking like I might run out of time here. Let's see. Jeremiah chapter 31 and verse 35. It says, thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar, and the Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart, so if there is no more sun, there's no more sea, there's no more moon, there's no more stars. If those ordinances depart, right? And when it says ordinances, right? The definition is an authoritative order. So the Lord gives an authoritative order to the sun, the stars, the moon, the waves, right? The waves go to the shore and they go back because that's where the Lord wants them to stop. The moon does what it does because that's what the Lord wants it to do, right? The sun does what it does because that's what the Lord wants it to do, right? So if those ordinances stop, right, like it says, if and the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divided the sea. Verse 36, if those ordinances depart, like if the sun just goes off whack, right, and the moon, does whatever it wants to do, the waves go wherever they start to want to go, start to flood the earth. If it starts to do that, right, and it's just out of order, right? Then it says this. It says, if those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. So the earth still spins, the moon still, whatever it's called, orbits the earth, and the sun does what it does, and the waves go back and forth exactly where the Lord wants them to. So the nation of Israel is still always gonna be the Lord's people. You understand? He's never gonna cast them away forever. All right. So and that's why the Lord, he says he's like a husband unto us. You know what I'm saying? He says we go off a horn, right? But the Lord doesn't like what's the word? To the putting away, right? He's not gonna tell us not to put away our wives, and then he goes and puts us away, right? He's gonna keep us as his people forever, in a sense. He might like I said, like Hosea said, cast us off from being his people, but the Lord did adopt us back. All right. So let's see, what time is it. I might have to go into this and another day, because it might take too long. Yeah, this might take a little bit too long, so I might have to wait on Galatians for the next class. All right, but let's actually go because we was talking about how in Romans 9:4, where it said Christ will come for the flesh. You understand? So let's do this one real quick. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 9. All right, and then we'll end it with this, and then we'll go into Galatians on the next class. All right, so we're gonna go to Hebrews chapter 9, and we're gonna start off let's start off with verse 11, right? Just to get a little bit of context, right? Because, like we said, the promise was given to Israel, you understand? And nobody else pertained to that promise. And Christ came for the flesh and blood Israelites, man, right? He came to seek and to save that which is lost. Who was lost in the world, you understand? Cut off from our power, cut off from our God, right? But Christ came to redeem us from that. All right, and I'm going to show you real quick. Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 11, it says, but Christ being come and the high priest of good things to come by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, having attained eternal redemption for us. All right. Now we're gonna see who the us is. All right. He attained eternal redemption for us. It says, for if the blood of bulls and of goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkled the unclean sanctify to the purifying of the flesh, right? So the Israelites would go and offer these things as an offering, right? To clean themselves, right? To what's the word? Well, basically to clean themselves, of their sins, to pay for their sins, right? They would go and take the bulls and goats and a heifer, and they will go and offer these things for any sin they might have committed, right? And verse 14, it says, let's read the end of verse 13. It says, to the purifying of the flesh, right? It says, how much more shall the blood of Christ, you understand? How much more will the blood of Christ purify us? You understand? How much more? It says, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God. He gave himself up, right? As a sacrifice, as a ultimate display of brotherhood, man. Ultimate display of brotherhood. He died for his brothers. You understand? He offered himself up that he would die so that we don't have to. You understand? And just imagine how evil and wicked we've all been in the world, right? All the things we've done. You understand? And for this, this perfect man to come and to die in our place, right? So it says, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? So that's the debt you owe, right? Is that now you have to change your life and become a new person. You understand? You have to purge yourself of these dead works, right? Dead works of being in the world, being of the world, right? Celebrating Christmas and your birthdays and Thanksgiving and eating pork, shrimp, crab, and lobster, and voting for heathens to be up over you and serving America. You understand? You need to purge yourself of these dead works and serve the living God. You understand? And that's the debt you owe. That's the debt you owe to Christ, that he died for you. So now you have to live for him. That's why, everything you should pray for should be in the name of Yahushua. You understand? Because anything you pray for should be what he wanted. He wanted the nation of Israel to rule the planet Earth. You understand? He wanted, these other nations to serve the nation of Israel. He wanted obedience for the Most High God of all Israelites. You understand? And that's the things you should be praying for. You understand? Because that's the debt you owe. You shouldn't pray for nothing you want. You understand? Everything you pray for should be what Christ wanted. You understand? So it says, verse 15, and for this cause, he is the mediator of the New Testament. You understand? For that cause that he gave his life, that he gave his spot-free life for the brothers, that he had. You understand? The brothers that of all Israel, the flesh that he came for, the flesh and blood Israelites. For this cause, he's the mediator. Mediator is a go-between, right? Like if you have two parties, right? Like it said in Hosea chapter 1 and verse 9, that they would no longer be his people, and he would no longer be their God. So they're not talking. You understand? They're not talking. The Most High God is not our people, not our God, and we are not his people. So now Christ is the mediator. He's the go-between, right? He's the person in between that talks to the Most High God for us. That's why everything we say, like I said, everything you pray for should be what Christ wanted, not what you want. You want, to win the lottery. You want, all these, nonsense, a new car, a new job, blah, 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 right? You should just go and try and work for it. Don't pray for that. Pray for what Christ wanted, because that's the debt you owe. He died for you. You live for him. He died that you can now pertain to this promise, pertain to this covenant, get adopted back by the Most High God. And for this cause, he's the mediator. He talks to the Most High for us, right? It says that by means of death for the redemption, right? So let's look up the word redemption. It says, I'm going to go with the second definition. It says the action of regaining or gaining possession of something. So that's what it means to redeem something, is that you regain or gain possession of something. So we know to regain something, it first has to be lost to regain it, right? That's why Christ said, I come to seek and to save that which is lost. He is regaining that which is lost, right? It says possession of something in exchange for a payment. All right. What was that payment to redeem, to regain Israel? Was it cost him his life? You understand? He gave his life for it. That was the payment that he paid. Was his life to regain that, to regain Israel, that they can be adopted back by the Most High God. He died for us to be God's people again. All right. It says, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament. So anybody that was under the first testament, that's who Christ died for. Now, I ask you, Christians, who was under the first testament? Only the Israelites was under the first testament. And that's who Christ came to redeem, to regain, to die for flesh and blood Israelites. Just like Paul said in Romans 9 and verse 5. Christ came for the flesh. All right. It says, under the first testament, they which are called. So we know Israel was only the ever the people that was called, might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. That promise, where we read in Romans 9, right? Romans the 9th chapter, that we would that Israel pertaineth the adoption, the glory, the covenant, the giving of the law, and the promises, man. You understand? Christ came to, he shed his blood only for the nation of Israel. Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indian people. You understand? Nobody else. Clear as day. He said it's all over the Bible. He even said out of his own mouth that he is not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. All right. So, like I said, I'll go into the rest of it probably on the next class. You understand? Go into a little bit more in Galatians and Romans and stuff. But we see the promise, right? Is the promise and the blessing is two completely different things. All right. And like I said, I was going to go into, the blessing that a heathen got, right? But I'll say it for the next class, right? It's completely different from what the promise is. You understand? That promise of eternal inheritance, like it said right here, it does not pertain to all the people on the planet. It only pertains to the Israelites, that they would have eternal inheritance of the earth, that they would be the nation of people above all people. Now, are people are other nations gonna be in the kingdom of heaven? Yes, of course. They're gonna be for servants and handmaids. You understand? They're gonna be to serve the nation of Israel, like we read. I will bless them that bless thee, as long as they stay blessing us. You understand? As long as they stay serving us, that's the only way that they're gonna catch any kind of blessing. You understand? Like, hell, you can say food is a blessing. Food stamps is a blessing, right? Here in this nation, like, they might catch that kind of blessing. You know what I'm saying? But they gotta bless us first, and they are not a part of the promise. All right, the promise of eternal inheritance, the promise of salvation, the promise of the kingdom of heaven. They're not a part of that. You understand? So, like I said, I'll go more into it on the next class. So, once again, we're the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, started on 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commanding General Yohana. All right. We got class every Monday through Friday, starting at 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Of course, here in the Trenton class, we start at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. All right. So tune in on Wednesday. Of course, we have class Monday through Friday, like I said. Tune in every Monday night, man, to Commanding General Yohana's YouTube podcast, right? Black Watch. Tune into that, man. Tune into that every Monday night starting at 9 p.m. Eastern time, man. Tune into it. All right. Press the like button, press the share button, right? Help this truth grow. And everybody needs to hear Commanding General. Everybody, but specifically Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indian people need to hear Commanding General Yohana's, podcast, hear his words, all right? Because he brings out heavy stuff every Monday night. So make sure y'all tune into that. Press the notification bell so y'all can get notified when he goes live, because he does go live throughout the week. All right. And of course, Monday night, 12 Shield General Hyman's class, man. Tune into that as well. Right. Always dropping heavy jewels. All right. Every Monday morning starting at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Let a Hebrew Speak. All right, with General Haziyan and Captain Akkad. Tune into that. All right, every Monday morning starting at 10 a.m. Every Wednesday morning starting at 11 a.m. we have Ask Ye the Prophets. All right, with 12 Shield General Mayaka Allah, right, and Officer of 1,000 Yediah. All right, tune into that as well. All right, you can send in your questions to all these platforms. Send in any questions you have pertaining to the Bible, pertaining to whatever you want. You understand? The generals will answer them for you. Okay. Every Thursday night we have Cross the Line Radio. Every Thursday night starting at 10 p.m. Eastern time. All right. Tune into that as well. Okay. And you can also call into that radio show, and you can get your question answered on live, right? Every Saturday we have the Sabbath service. Tune into the Sabbath service, man. Tune into the Sabbath service. All right. We got to keep that day holy. You understand? And not only tune in, but come into the live class, man. It's important to show the Lord, that extra effort, like the scripture says. Like the scripture says, man, that it was in you to leave from the Lord. Seek him 10 times more, man. You got to show him that you are willing to serve him 10-fold, you understand, than what you was doing in the world. If you was that type of cat that was putting up Christmas lights and hanging the Santa Claus and reindeer on the top of your roof, and doing the whole thing outside, and you got the biggest Christmas tree in your house, you got to show 10 times the zeal for the Lord. Come into that Sabbath service, man. Make sure you keep it holy. And of course, we have the Passover, Cocoa Beach, Florida, right? April 15th, man. Come down to the Passover. All right. What else? Pay your tithes, man. ISBK.com. Pay your tithes. All right. Your tithes is a commandment. All right. So with that, shalom, Israel.